Japan loves small things. And yes, last time I was about to make a joke about something that's small.
Before moving to Japan to teach English on the JET program, I took an introduction to Japanese culture class in which the teacher shared an anecdote with us. He said that Japanese people love less. They love small things.
Okay.
I don't know why, but they just do.
Again, sounds like a
And he
joke
said
about
that
fallacies.
this was best exemplified by this paradoxical experience he had in which he came across a vending machine.
I was gonna say it's a big vending machine culture over there. They have a lot of gacha stuff, a lot of small things, a lot of like anime figurines and stuff. They're tiny. They have a lot of bentos that are very small. Like sushi is small in that aspect. Yeah, I can see where they're coming from here.
In rural Japan that sold two drinks, one large, one small. Same
Cool.
drink, same price. And when I heard that,
Wow.
I just thought, what? There's no way that's true because who in their right mind would pay the same for less? But when I came to Japan, I witnessed this firsthand. I'd go to my supermarket and see people buying packs
Honestly, I guess it is because they feel like it might be a waste. So if they're paying the same for less, like I don't get it personally because I would just buy the big one, crack it in two, and boom, you have it for two dinners or two meals or whatever. Maybe not a cola because the bubbles disappear. The bubbles.
of one ringi mushroom when packs
Ringi?
of two were just as cheap. An ex-girlfriend of mine purposely chose to live in a small apartment when there were others in the area that were in the same price point but
I don't get it.
significantly larger. I said, why don't you move into one of these larger places? Wouldn't that be more comfortable? And her response was just, いや、別にいらないから. And I simply couldn't understand this. I kept going back to,
But it's not a bad mentality, but I don't need it. The only difference is if you're buying one mushroom versus 5 mushrooms, you can make 5 meals if you only need one mushroom a meal. You can even freeze it. So you do need it. You just don't need it at that particular time. I kind of agree with the idea of the apartment though, because the apartment is small and you don't need it, so why get it?
why pay the same for less? Wouldn't it be better to have more space just in case? But I never really got an answer that made sense to me, so I kind of just chalked it up to Japanese weirdness and more or less stopped thinking about it. But this question popped back into my mind again fairly recently with the announcement of a new camera. You see, a couple months ago, my buddy Harris Heller, he swung by Beppu to hang out.
Wait, I've seen that guy before. I don't know where he's
And
from.
when he did, he had a Panasonic.
Isn't he a camera guy? I think he might be a camera guy because I used to follow a bit of camera YouTube before because I do actually I'm filming it on an S5 right now. So yeah,
Like S9 with him. It's this new Panasonic camera that they had given him to review. And when I saw it, I thought, hey, that's a pretty cool camera. Let's see what all the reviewers have to say about it when the embargo lifts. Well, the reviews dropped and something very interesting happened. The comments on the English reviews of the camera and the comments on the Japanese reviews of the camera were markedly different. The West seemed to say that Panasonic had cut too many corners in the pursuit of making a smaller camera. Some even went as far as to say that, given the current camera market, no one in their right mind would buy such a product. And the sentiment in the Japanese comments was,
perfect. It's a perfect size. I love it. Best camera ever. Very easy for camera vacation. Maybe.
かわいい、めっちゃ欲しいんだけど. And 2 weeks later, while people in the West continued to attack Panasonic for making such a pointless device, the S9 went on to become the second best selling camera in Japan,
Holy
forcing
schnitzel.
Panasonic to issue an apology for not being able to ship units quickly enough. So why?
Wow.
What's with the love of less, the love of the small in Japan? In my recent video on the Nankai megathrust earthquakes, I talked about how Japan's culture of hard work and cooperation may have evolved as a sort of survival mechanism.
Of course, it makes sense as well because a lot of colder climates, I feel, are really good at cooperation. And I feel like a lot of the warmer climates are much more relaxed and not so stressed in their approaches. Because, well, winter is coming, and if you don't have meat and food and wood for winter, you're dead. But in the warmer climates, you can still go fishing every day.
But the reason Japanese people do so much overtime and are so concerned about not upsetting the peace is because hard work, caution, and cooperation were necessary in an environment in which a cataclysmic earthquake or tsunami could hit at any time. The thing is, I think that these natural disasters are also directly responsible for at least part of Japan's love of the small. I think that it's been the earthquakes, the tsunami, the taihu, and the fires that have led to this culture of kawaii. You see, in response to that earthquake video I recently made, there was a fair number of people that said, if these tsunami are so destructive and so common, then why don't Japanese people just move? Why don't they?
Actually, that is a genuinely good question, because there are certain areas in Japan that aren't very much hit by it. And you have coastal cities that are really hit by it. So it is a genuinely good question, but and maybe they like it.
Go to a coast that doesn't have as many earthquakes, or why don't they just move more inland? And this is because, to begin with, there aren't any safe coasts. Again, the 2011 earthquake, the most powerful earthquake in Japanese history, that didn't occur along that southern coast of Honshu where all the Nankai megathrust earthquakes happen. It occurred along the country's eastern coast. And the most powerful destructive earthquake that's happened since then was earlier this year. That was the Noto earthquake that happened along the country's northern coast. And to answer the other question, why don't Japanese people just move more inland? This is because that land simply doesn't exist. Take a look at this topographic map of Japan.
Oh, it's mountainous. Oh, I see.
Now, I would wager that even people who aren't familiar with Japanese geography can accurately guess, based on this map, where all of the major cities are.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's in this region, in this region, in this region, in this region, because most of this is a mountain, maybe in this region as well. Here seems like maybe up here, yeah, so a lot of coastal line, I guess. But like Japan, they took over a big piece of China in, I think it was the Second World War. They've done it multiple times. They've gone and taken a lot of China, so maybe not be greedy and just like defended a piece of China and then moved a lot of people into China. Yeah, boy. Then it would have had Japanese China.
That's right. Here.
Yep.
Here.
Yep.
And here.
Yes,
it's
sir.
No coincidence
and on the other side
that the majority of Japan's population has gathered in a few select places. They're the only places flat enough to actually build cities with both robust transportation infrastructure and a seaport to facilitate trade. All the people are in the flat areas because that's where the productive farmland is. That's where you can build the big factories and the car plants.
Yeah, so he's not saying you can't move inland, but you can't make the same type of infrastructure inland. Because there's more mountain, there's less place to make, as he said, literally just said like the infrastructure.
Et cetera, et cetera. You want to move the 60, 70, 80 million people from the few flat areas up into the mountains? Yeah, it might be possible, but it's not practical. It's going to bring the country's productivity to zero. This is one of the reasons they keep building reclaimed islands here, why Otomo speculated in Akira that Neo-Tokyo would be built on top of Tokyo Bay, because all the good land has already been used up. So despite how crazy it may seem, in many instances, it's actually easier and far more convenient to expand into the ocean than it is to build up into the mountains.
Not gonna lie, if anybody's gonna manage that, it's them hiring the Dutch. Because the Dutch have this wild goddamn thing about pumping out water and stuff. So maybe they could make Neo-Tokyo just like big New Tokyo. How dope would that be? What an anime would come out of that? Sucking up Tokyo out of the water. God damn it, that would be cool. Come on, make an anime out of that, guys.
Right, but what does this have to do with Japan's love of the small? Everything. One, because as we've just demonstrated, the premium for space in Japan is so much higher than it is in a place like the United States. And two, because even if you're lucky enough to live in one of the nicer areas, historically speaking, owning more and bigger and heavier things has always meant getting hit harder when disaster inevitably struck.
So basically what he's saying is, if you own more, you're gonna lose more. But would that makes no sense in the terms of, if the apartment you're renting is larger and costs the same, you're not gonna lose more because you still, unless you fill your house with more shit. But that doesn't have to be the case. You might just have a bit more space for an easel and some drawing equipment. That's gonna lose you what, 100 euros more? Yeah, I'm not quite seeing the point so far.
May seem like I'm connecting unrelated dots here, but this is actually taught through literature and historical essays in Japanese schools. There's a famous author, Kamono Chome, whose book, The Hojoki, is actually required reading in the public Japanese school curriculum.
Interesting.
And the Hojoki is essentially the author's account of packing
how to ruin the love of literature for kids. You have to read these classics or else you will fail school. And then when you get out of school, you're like, oh, I don't ever want to touch a classic again.
Up and abandoning a privileged life to live in a 10-foot by 10-foot empty portable home after experiencing a bunch of earthquakes, fires, and typhoons. Cholme basically came to the conclusion, what's the point of spending all this money on these big expensive things that will only weigh me
I get the
down and
point,
could
yeah, I can
disappear at
see
a
it.
moment's notice in the next natural disaster? He writes, all human endeavors are foolish, but spending one's fortune and troubling one's mind to build a house in such a dangerous capital is particularly vain.
But wouldn't that just mean that he would go and build it in the mountains and it would have a much lesser chance of breaking? I'm not seeing the logic here. Because he's saying all human endeavors are foolish, so why do anything by this definition? But among them, spending one's fortune and troubling one's mind to build a house in such a dangerous capital is particularly vain. So don't build it in the capital then. Just like the guy said, you might be able to move everybody up in the mountains, but it won't be productive. That doesn't mean some people can't move there, especially a person that's bringing his house everywhere.
You know, it's funny. We often talk about how interesting it is that certain animals will grow to match the size of their environments. Goldfish, for example, if you keep them in a small tank, they'll stay small. But if you put them in a big lake, they can become enormous.
Massive.
But I actually think that humans are the same. If you look at house tours for famous people that live in the United States, for
I'm not necessarily sure. I can see his correlation, but I can't agree with this. Just because you grow big as a celebrity and you get something grand and loads of money doesn't mean you have to buy a 2,000 feet mansion. Like, you can easily just buy a normal house. And Warren Buffett is a great example of this. He still lives in his old house and drives his old car. And there's multiple streamers that are similar to that. Of course you have streamers that suddenly go, oh, I made billions, I'm going to use all my money on a mansion. That is retarded. If you have a nice house with a decent amount of space, you're good, right? And a lot of people find that they're good. So I'm not quite, I kind of see what he's going with it, but I don't necessarily agree.
For example, you often see that they have 3 or 4, maybe sometimes 5 or 6 extra rooms, extra bedrooms or bathrooms that will likely never use. But they get them because they have the luxury of being able to flex. Again, this is why I think that Japan loves the small, the portable, the kawaii, the Walkman, the Game Boy, the PSP.
No, that's bullshit though, because we like the Game Boy, we like the PSP, we liked all these things too. But the causations here is it's very difficult for me to sit here and say this is why they love small things. Like, this is more of an unproven theory so far, rather than something that actually holds any merit.
I think that generations and generations of people living through unimaginable earthquakes and catastrophic tsunami and fires and typhoons in a place where there's such a high premium on space has led to this culture that asks, what can I throw away? How can I get rid of some more dead weight? What features can I take out to make this a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter? A culture that says, a bigger apartment? Ya, 別にいらない.
Yeah, but if it costs the same, it's no downside. You don't even have to fill the space. You could literally just use it as a clothes rack. Like, I see where he's going. He's saying that the mentality has shifted over all the years, but I don't see the logic behind it.
I would rather have a Nintendo Switch than a gaming PC and a small
Yeah, but a Nintendo Switch is great. They got different games than a gaming PC.
Camera that eventually overheats over a big one that can shoot forever. A culture that says just enough is better than a cumbersome surplus. Because in Japan, a cumbersome surplus has always meant more to lose.
I mean, his theory isn't terrible, but it feels... I don't see the logic. I really don't see the logic. I have a problem understanding this because I don't need much. I have very little in my life. And still, if there's a sale of 2 kilos of meat for the same price as 500 grams, I'm sure as hell buying the 2 kilos of meat because I can freeze the rest. So I don't quite understand it. But it was nonetheless a very interesting video, and I will definitely keep looking at his videos.